There's a moment in every life when the past stops waiting. Mine found me in a dim hospital room, through the eyes of the boy I once called my brother. And what he told me forced me to question everything I believed about myself. I never thought a friendship could rot quietly, the way old wood decays beneath fresh paint, invisible until you finally dare to touch it. For years, I convinced myself that what happened between us was just life pulling us in different directions, the way people always say it does. But as I stand here now, in the town I promised myself I'd never return to, the truth presses against my ribs so hard it feels like I can barely breathe. Life didn't pull us apart. Something else did, something neither of us ever had the courage to say out loud. The first thing that hits me is the stillness. The streets where we used to ride our bikes until the streetlights flickered on feel smaller now, quieter, as if they have grown tired of waiting for the two boys who once believed they were invincible. I walk past the old convenience store, the cracked basketball court, the riverbed where we carved our initials into a stone we swore would outlast us. Everything is exactly where we left it, except the version of me standing here. That version died a long time ago. When I got the message that brought me back, just a 6-word text that landed in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, I stared at my phone for nearly an hour, my hands shaking even though I told everyone I didn't feel anything about him anymore. You should know, he's asking for you. That was all it said. No explanation. No apology. No details. But I knew exactly who he was. And I knew what it meant. I told myself I didn't owe him anything. Not after what he did. Not after what he stole. Yet here I am, dragging my suitcase down the same cracked sidewalk that leads to the house where everything between us fell apart. I don't know why I came. Maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I'm here out of some twisted sense of unfinished business, the kind people carry in the spaces between their ribs, the kind that tightens whenever they lie to themselves. As I reach his street, memories slam into me like tidal waves. The porch where we sat during summer storms, talking about futures we were too young to understand. The window where he used to tap 3 times when he wanted me to sneak out. The garage where we made our biggest plans, and where we shattered them in one night I've tried for years to forget. I stop at the gate. It's rusted now, leaning slightly to one side, as if time has worn it down the same way it wore us down. For a moment, I consider turning around, getting back into the taxi, asking the driver to take me anywhere else, anywhere that isn't here. But something keeps my feet planted. Maybe it's anger. Maybe it's regret. Maybe it's the part of me that never stopped wondering what would have happened if he hadn't betrayed me, or if I hadn't walked away without demanding an explanation. The house looks smaller than I remember, but the tension crawling beneath my skin feels bigger. I grip the strap of my bag until my knuckles turn white. I think about the last words I said to him, thrown like knives across a room filled with broken trust we were too young to repair. I think about how he didn't chase after me. I think about how he let the silence between us thicken until it calcified. Now, after all these years, he wants to see me. Why now? Why me? Why after everything he ruined? I inhale deeply, the September air sharp and cool, carrying with it the faintest smell of rain and something else, nostalgia, maybe, or the ghosts of the boys we used to be. I don't know what waits for me behind that door. An apology? A confession? Another lie? Or maybe he doesn't want forgiveness at all. Maybe he wants something darker. Something he never told anyone. Something connected to the night our friendship died and neither of us ever spoke of again. I reach for the doorbell with a hand that isn't as steady as I hoped it would be. Part of me wants answers. Part of me wants to leave. And part of me is still terrified of the truth I've spent years avoiding. As my finger presses the button, one thought pulses through me like a heartbeat. This time, I'm ready to hear the truth, even if it destroys everything I have left of us. The door opened slower than I expected, as if the person behind it wasn't entirely sure they wanted to see who was standing there. For a second, only a sliver of dim hallway light spilled out. Then the door swung wider, and instead of him, I found myself staring at someone I didn't recognize. A woman, maybe in her mid-40s, stood there with cautious eyes and a thin-lipped, polite smile that didn't reach them. Her hair was tied back in a loose knot, and her hands fidgeted nervously with the hem of her sweater. Whoever she was, she definitely knew who I was. The recognition in her expression wasn't subtle. "You must be him," she said quietly. The way she said him sent a shiver down my spine. Like it wasn't a name, just a role I had no choice but to step into. Yes, I answered, my voice barely steady. "Is he?" She nodded stiffly. "He's inside. He's been asking about you since yesterday. He hasn't been well." I swallowed hard. "Can I see him?" "Of course." But, she hesitated, biting her lip. "Just, be prepared. He's not the same person you remember." Her words landed like cold stones in my stomach. Of course he wasn't the same person. Neither was I. But something about the way she said it, like it was more than age, more than illness, more than time catching up, made me uneasy. She stepped aside, letting me in. The house smelled different now. Not like the reckless boyhood chaos of our teenage years. No stale pizza boxes. No sweat from late-night basketball games in the driveway. No muddy shoes left carelessly in the hall. Instead, it smelled faintly of antiseptic and something floral, like someone had tried to mask the scent of sickness with cheap air freshener. I followed her through the hallway, my footsteps sounding too loud on the worn wooden floor. The walls were lined with photos, most of which I didn't recognize. Family gatherings. Vacations. Birthdays. He was in a few of them, smiling awkwardly, standing at the edge of each frame like he wasn't sure if he belonged there. The woman must have noticed me glancing at the pictures. "I'm his sister," she said softly. "We don't talk much about, before. But he said you'd understand." "Understand what?" "Understand the silence he left behind. Understand the betrayal." Understand the night everything shattered? I wasn't sure I understood anything. She stopped outside a door at the end of the hall. Her hand hovered over the knob, but she didn't open it. Instead, she turned to me with a look that was equal parts pity and warning. He's been carrying something for years, she said. Something he should have said a long time ago. Maybe he thinks telling you now will help. My stomach twisted. Help who? I don't know, she whispered. Maybe him. Maybe you. Maybe both. Without another word, she opened the door. The room was dim. Heavy curtains blocked most of the light, leaving only a few weak rays to stretch across the bed. He lay there, thinner than I remembered, his face pale and drawn, dark circles carving deep shadows beneath his eyes. His hair was shorter, his jaw unshaven. He looked older, not just in years, but in weight, as if life had been pressing on him without mercy. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen in the doorway. He turned his head slowly, and when his eyes met mine, something inside me twisted painfully. He didn't look surprised. It was as if he'd known I was coming long before I did. You came, he said, his voice rough and weak. I stepped inside. The door closed softly behind me. I got your message, I said, though we both knew that wasn't why I came. I came because I needed answers. Because I needed closure. Because I needed to face the ghost that had been haunting the last decade of my life. He tried to sit up, but pain flickered across his face, and he sank back against the pillow with a frustrated sigh. You look the same, he murmured. I didn't reply. I didn't trust myself to. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The silence stretched, tense and fragile. So many words, anger, confusion, questions, pressed against the back of my throat, but none of them made it out. You hate me, he said finally. I get it. I always knew you did. His voice cracked on the last word. I felt something inside me pull tight. I don't hate you, I said quietly. I just stopped understanding who you were. One day you were my best friend, and the next. I know, he interrupted, closing his eyes. I know what I did. And I don't expect forgiveness. He opened his eyes again and looked at me, and there was something there, a heaviness, a desperation, that made my breath catch. But you deserve the truth, he said. All of it. And I can't leave this world without telling you. My heart stumbled. The truth. The thing he'd kept buried for a decade. The thing that tore our friendship apart. The thing that hollowed him out from the inside. I took a step closer, anxiety curling tight in my stomach. What truth? I asked. He blinked slowly, a tear escaping the corner of his eye. The truth about that night, he whispered. My pulse hammered in my ears. Here it was. The moment I had feared. The moment I had waited for. The moment that would shatter what little I still believed. Before I could speak, he reached toward the drawer beside his bed with trembling fingers. There's something I need you to see, he said. Something I should have given you a long time ago. His voice broke completely. And I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. And with those words, the past, the one I tried to bury, rose like a tide I couldn't outrun. For a moment, I didn't move. I watched his trembling hand reach for the drawer, watched the strain in his arm, watched the way his breathing grew shallow from the simple effort. He looked fragile in a way I never thought possible, nothing like the boy who used to outrun me on summer mornings, who climbed the tallest trees just to prove he could, who laughed like the world couldn't touch him. Now the world had touched him too hard, too brutally, and left nothing but the outline of who he used to be. I stepped forward and gently pushed his hand aside before he could pull the drawer open. He looked up at me, confused. Let me, I said. He nodded, exhausted. My fingers hovered for a moment over the drawer handle. I wasn't sure why my pulse was pounding so violently, fear, anger, curiosity, grief. Maybe all of them. Maybe none. Maybe I was afraid that whatever was inside would confirm the things I'd spent years trying not to believe, or destroy the last scraps of what I hoped wasn't true. I pulled the drawer open. Inside was a small, battered notebook. The edges were frayed, the cover faded from what must have once been a dark red. My chest tightened at the sight of it. I recognized it instantly. It was his. The one he used to carry everywhere. The one he used to sketch in during classes, during lunch breaks, during every moment we weren't running around like idiots. The last time I saw it was the night everything between us ended. You kept this, I said quietly. He swallowed, his throat moving with visible difficulty. I kept everything from that night. I lifted the notebook. It felt heavier than it should have, like the paper inside had soaked up all the guilt and silence and years we didn't speak. I turned to him, the question already forming on my lips. Why now? I asked. Why bring me back? Why after 10 years? He closed his eyes for a moment, his chest rising and falling in careful, controlled breaths. Because I thought I had more time, he whispered. And then the doctor said I didn't. And suddenly the truth mattered more than my fear. My heart twisted. Fear of what? Fear of losing you twice, he said, opening his eyes again. Once was enough. I stiffened, a cold wave of memory rushing through me. Once. He was talking about the night we stopped being friends, the night he betrayed me in a way I couldn't understand or forgive. I sat down beside the bed, placing the notebook on my lap but not opening it yet. Just feeling it there made everything inside me shift. I need you to say it, I murmured. I need to hear the words from you. What you did. What happened that night? He looked away, shame rippling across his features. His jaw clenched. His fingers dug weakly into the blanket. I was 17, he said finally. Too proud. Too scared. Too stupid to ask for help. And I made the worst choice of my life. My throat tightened. What choice? He hesitated again, breath trembling. You remember the party, he asked. Of course I did. How could I forget? The music, the laughter, the alcohol we were too young to drink. The way the night blurred at the edges. The moment I realized my phone was gone. The moment I realized someone had sent messages from it, messages that tore apart my relationship, my trust, my life. You stole my phone, I whispered. He flinched, as if the words were knives. Yes. And you sent those texts, I continued, my voice shaking. Pretending to be me. Telling everyone I said things I didn't. I know, he said. I know what I did. You ruined everything, I said, not angrily, just truthfully. My girlfriend thought I betrayed her. My friends turned their backs. My parents grounded me for a month. And you just watched. His eyes glistened. I wasn't watching. I was falling apart. Then why didn't you stop it? Why didn't you admit it? Why didn't you tell me the truth? He wiped a tear from the edge of his eye. Because I was jealous. The words hit me like a punch. Jealous? Of what? You were everything I wasn't, he continued. Everyone liked you. You were good at everything. You had this light, and I was drowning in my own mess. I hated myself for feeling that way. And instead of dealing with it, I destroyed the one person who actually cared about me. I stared at him, pain spreading across my chest like a bruise. You didn't just destroy me, I said softly. You destroyed us. I know, he whispered. And I regretted it every day since. The room felt heavy with the weight of all the words we never said, the years we let rot between us without daring to touch them. But that's not all, he said, his voice dropping lower. There's something else. Something bigger. Something I should have told you that same night. My stomach twisted again. Of course there was more. There had always been more. Something beneath his betrayal. Something we stopped talking about long before that party. What? I asked. My voice came out quieter than I intended. He looked at me with eyes full of fear and something else, something like determination. That night, he said slowly, I wasn't just jealous. I wasn't just angry. I wasn't myself. A chill ran down my spine. What does that mean? It means, he whispered, that you weren't the only one who changed that year. I swallowed hard, fingers tightening on the notebook. Open it, he said. His voice cracked. Please. My hands trembled as I flipped the notebook open. The first page was blank. The second too. But the third. My breath stopped. There, written in hurried, frantic handwriting, were the words. There's something wrong with me, and I'm scared of what I'm becoming. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words on the page blurred slightly, not because of the lighting, but because my mind refused to accept what I was seeing. I traced the sentence again with my eyes, slow, deliberate, as if the meaning might change if I gave it enough time. There's something wrong with me, and I'm scared of what I'm becoming. I looked up at him. He was watching me closely, his breathing shallow, his eyes shining with an emotion I couldn't place, fear, regret, something darker, something that didn't belong in the eyes of the boy I once knew. What is this? I asked softly. My truth, he said. The one I never showed to anyone. Not even my sister. I glanced back at the page. Below the sentence, more words sprawled in uneven lines, rushed and frantic like someone writing in the dark while their hands shook. I feel like I'm losing control. I forget things. Sometimes I don't remember how I got somewhere. Sometimes I say things I didn't mean. Sometimes I hurt people without wanting to. Sometimes. I think I like it. A cold wave spread through my chest. This wasn't jealousy. This wasn't teenage insecurity. This was something else entirely. Something like the confession of someone unraveling. When did this start? I asked, my voice barely steady. He swallowed. Around the time everything fell apart between us. Maybe earlier. I didn't notice it at first. It was small things, blackouts. Moments when I felt like I was watching myself from outside my body. But then it got worse. I flipped to the next page. More writing, more frantic scribbles. I pushed him. I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to. I told him I was sorry, but I wasn't saying it to him. I was saying it to myself. He looked scared of me. I don't blame him. I'm scared too. My breath caught. He. Who's he? I asked. He looked away. My cousin. The one who broke his arm when he fell from the porch. I remembered that story. Everyone said the kid slipped. Everyone said it was an accident. But here, written in ink, was a version of the truth no one ever mentioned. You shoved him? I whispered. I don't know, he answered. I think I did. But when it happened, it felt like I wasn't the one doing it. Like something else was moving through me. His voice trembled. Like anger that wasn't mine. I felt a strange pressure in my chest. Fear, yes. But also something else, recognition. A memory I didn't want to recall. A phase in my own life when I felt off. Unlike myself. A time we never talked about. What else is in here? I asked, flipping further. He flinched. You don't have to. I do. The next pages were filled not with words but drawings, dark, harsh sketches that looked nothing like the gentle doodles he used to draw in school. These were jagged shapes, twisted faces, figures in shadows, eyes staring out of black scribbles. One page showed two silhouettes, one pushing the other. The next page showed a hand reaching for a phone. Another page showed a figure curled up in a corner with the words, "I'm sorry," repeated dozens of times. I felt my skin grow cold. "You were spiraling," I murmured. He nodded shakily. "And I didn't know how to stop it." "Why didn't you tell someone?" "Anyone." He laughed weakly, the kind of laugh that breaks instead of lifts. "Who?" "My parents. They barely noticed when I came home bleeding from a fight I didn't remember starting. My teachers. They thought I was acting out. And you." He stopped. "And me?" I pressed. "You were the only person who saw me before any of it started," he said softly. "You were the only one I didn't want to lose. And the one person I should have trusted the most became the one person I hurt the worst." A silence settled between us, heavy and suffocating. Not the silence of anger anymore. The silence of truth. I flipped another page and froze. There, scrawled in messy handwriting, was a date. The night of the party. My stomach tightened. Under it were words written so chaotically they slanted across the page. I didn't want to ruin him. I didn't want to hurt him. But something inside me said he deserved it. Something said take from him what he took from me. But he didn't take anything. It was all in my head. I'm losing myself. I'm losing something. I'm scared he'll find out what I really am. I looked at him sharply. "What did you think you were?" His eyes filled again. "Broken." "That's not an answer." He inhaled shakily. "No. It's not." I closed the notebook. My hands were trembling. "Why show me this now?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "Because I'm dying. And I don't want to die with this secret. And because you deserve to know the whole truth, even the parts that weren't your burden to carry." I searched his face. "Was the jealousy real?" I asked. "Or was that part of this?" "Both," he said. "The jealousy gave it a doorway. The other thing, whatever was happening inside me, walked through it." I shook my head slowly. "This doesn't explain everything." "No," he murmured. "It doesn't." He looked at me with a desperation that made my chest twist. "There's more," he whispered. "Something you don't know. Something I did. Something I should have told you years ago." My pulse quickened. "What did you do?" He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, his body trembled violently and he coughed, the sound wet and painful. His sister rushed in, worry etched across her face. "You need to rest," she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "No," he rasped. "He needs to know, before it's too late." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Please. Give him a moment." I stepped back as she helped him breathe easier. But even from the doorway, I could hear him whispering. "Please don't hate me, when you hear the rest." And I knew then. The truth wasn't finished. And whatever came next would change everything again. His coughing finally eased, though each breath still rattled faintly, like his lungs were made of thin, cracking glass. His sister dabbed his forehead with a damp cloth, whispering something too soft for me to catch. I stood in the doorway, unable to move, feeling like a ghost intruding on a moment that should have belonged only to family. But the truth was, I was family once, not by blood, but by everything else that mattered. When she stepped away, she paused by me. 10 minutes, she said quietly. Then he needs to rest. I nodded. But the truth was, I didn't know how much more I could take. My heart felt like it was being held together by thin threads, each new revelation pulling harder until I wasn't sure what would snap first, my anger, my patience, or something deeper. I walked slowly back to his bedside. His eyes were open again, dull but determined, like someone fighting sleep to stay alive long enough to say one final thing. He motioned weakly for the notebook. "No," I said firmly, placing a hand on it. "No more pages for now. You tell me." He closed his eyes for a moment, gathering the strength to speak. When he did, his voice was quieter than before, but clearer, like a man who knew there were no more lies left to hide behind. "That night wasn't the beginning," he said. "It was the breaking point." I swallowed hard. "The night of the party?" "No," he whispered. "Weeks before that." A silent chill spread across my skin. "I hurt someone else," he said. "Not physically. Not like my cousin. But I hurt them in a way that can't be undone." My stomach dropped. "Who?" He stared at the ceiling, the corners of his eyes tightening. "Your brother." I felt the floor tilt under me. "My, what? What does my brother have to do with this?" "He came to see me," he said. "Before the party. Before the messages. He came to ask me what was wrong with me." I stepped backward, my pulse hammering. "I thought he hated me," I said. "He didn't," he whispered. "He was worried. He saw the changes before anyone else did. He saw me losing control. And he tried to talk to me about it." My hands curled into fists. My brother had always been the mediator, the calm one, the one who saw things others missed. I remembered him asking me back then whether everything between us was really okay. I told him it was none of his business. I pushed him away, I muttered. He shook his head weakly. He didn't care. He came anyway. The room felt smaller now, shrinking with every word. "What did you say to him?" I asked. He shut his eyes like he didn't want to see the memory. "Things I didn't mean. Things that weren't mine." "What does that even mean?" "I told him lies," he said. "I told him things about you. I told him you said things behind his back. That you didn't respect him. That you were tired of being compared to him. My breath caught. Why would you do that? His voice cracked. Because I wanted you to myself. Because whatever was happening inside me twisted everything, jealousy, fear, confusion. And he was standing between us. I felt my throat close. He never told me. He opened his eyes. Because he didn't want to ruin your friendship. He thought you'd confront him. He thought you'd ask him if any of it was true. He thought you'd talk. Tears blurred my vision. My brother had looked at me strangely that week. Quietly. Carefully. Like he was waiting for something. I had shrugged it off, swallowed by my own life and my own problems. I didn't know, I whispered. I didn't know he came to you. I know, he said. He tried to fix things. I made sure he couldn't. The words hit with the weight of a decade of silence. My brother had tried to protect me, from him, from whatever darkness was growing inside him, and I never saw it. But that's not the part you need to know, he said weakly. I looked at him sharply. What's worse than that? His eyes drifted to the notebook. There's a page I tore out. The one I never wanted anyone to read. My chest tightened. Why tear it out? Because it was the moment I realized I wasn't just losing control. He swallowed hard. I was being controlled. My skin prickled. By what? I don't know, he whispered. But there were moments, seconds, where it felt like someone else was steering my thoughts. My words. My actions. I'd snap back and realize I had done something I didn't remember deciding to do. I took a shaky breath. That sounds like dissociation. Trauma. Stress. No, he said firmly, with surprising strength. This was different. This was targeted. Directed. Focused. And the worst part? I waited. It only happened when I was near you. Something inside me lurched, like my heart tripped over itself. What? I whispered. He nodded slowly. I don't know why. I don't know what it was. But every time I was around you, something inside me twisted. Like it wanted to hurt you. Like it wanted to break you. I took another step back. My whole body felt cold. That's why I destroyed everything, he said, tears falling now. Not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stop it. And the more I fought it, the stronger it got. I stared at him, my mind spinning. This wasn't jealousy anymore. This wasn't teenage cruelty. This was something deeper, something internal, something fractured. Something frightening. And your brother, he whispered, voice breaking. He knew. He was the only one who realized something was wrong before it was too late. My breath hitched. What do you mean, too late? He looked at me with eyes full of fear. The kind of fear that doesn't come from guilt. But from remembering something monstrous. I hurt him, he said. Not physically. But I told him something that broke him. My heart clenched. What did you tell him? He hesitated. His lips trembled. I told him the truth, he whispered. What truth? That you weren't the person he thought you were. I stiffened. Why would you say that? He shut his eyes, a tear sliding down his cheek. Because I believed it, he whispered. Because the thing inside me made me believe it. I stared at him, breath shaking. And the page you tore out? I asked. He nodded, terrified. It explains everything, he said. But you need to find it. His voice cracked. I hid it in this house. And if you don't read it now, you'll never understand what happened to either of us. I felt the bottom drop out of my stomach. Where is it? I whispered. He looked past me, toward the hallway. The attic, he said. Behind the old boards. And then. Hurry. I stood there, frozen, as his words hung in the air like dust motes caught in dying sunlight. The attic. Of all places in this house, it had to be the one spot I never wanted to return to. The last time we climbed up there together, we were kids, laughing, out of breath, searching for old comic books and forgotten treasures. I remembered cobwebs clinging to our shirts, the sharp smell of dust, the heat pressing down like a heavy blanket. But that was years before everything fractured. Before mistrust seeped in. Before the night that ended us. Now, the word attic felt different, ominous, almost venomous. As if the truth had been waiting there all along, gathering dust, quietly poisoning the air. Are you sure it's there? I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. He nodded, his breath unsteady. I hid it where no one would think to look. I didn't want my sister to find it. Didn't want anyone to. Not until you came back. Why me? He stared at me, eyes glassy and distant. Because it's about you. All of it. My pulse stuttered. What does that mean? But he only shook his head, exhausted. Just, go. Before I lose the courage to tell you the rest. Something about the way he said that terrified me more than anything else he'd confessed. I turned toward the hallway, gripping the notebook so tightly the edges dug into my palm. As I walked, I felt his eyes on my back, not blaming, not desperate, but pleading. His sister watched from the doorway, arms crossed as if bracing for whatever storm was coming. Be careful, she said. I didn't ask what she meant. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. The hallway stretched ahead like a tunnel I'd walked 1,000 times in childhood dreams. The wooden boards creaked under my feet, each groan echoing the tension in my chest. At the end stood the pull-down attic ladder, folded up against the ceiling, a thin metal chain dangling down like an invitation or a warning. I reached up. My fingers trembled as they curled around the chain. For a moment, I just stood there, listening. The house was quiet, too quiet, broken only by the distant hum of a refrigerator and the soft murmur of voices from the living room. The silence seemed to vibrate, thick and heavy. I pulled. The ladder unfolded with a long, dry groan, like the house was waking from a deep sleep it didn't want to leave. Dust rained down, speckling my hair and shirt. A faint, cold draft drifted from the darkness above. I swallowed hard. This was ridiculous. There was nothing supernatural here. Nothing to fear. Just a forgotten sheet of notebook paper scribbled on by an unraveling teenager. And yet, my heart hammered like something inside me knew the truth wasn't just ink on paper. I climbed. Each step creaked, bending slightly under my weight. By the time my head rose above the attic floor, a wave of musty air hit me, dry wood, insulation, old metal, the lingering scent of forgotten things. I pulled myself up fully and stood, brushing dust from my hands. It was darker than I remembered, even with the small round window on the far side letting in a sliver of daylight. Boxes sat in uneven stacks, their labels faded. An old bicycle frame leaned against the far wall. Childhood toys, winter decorations, broken furniture, everything looked like it had been left exactly where the past dropped it. I flipped the weak pull string of the single hanging bulb. It flickered once, twice, then glowed faintly, casting uneven shadows across the space. Great. Perfect horror movie lighting. I took a breath and scanned the floorboards near the far wall, where the wood looked newer, cleaner. Behind the old boards, he'd said. I walked slowly toward it, feeling each step vibrate slightly beneath the decades-old planks. My pulse thudded in my ears. A part of me whispered that I wasn't ready for whatever I was about to find. Another part whispered I had waited too long. When I reached the wall, I crouched down. The boards were indeed newer, replaced at some point, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Recent enough to be suspicious. I ran my fingers along the bottom edge and felt something metal beneath the surface. A loose nail. I tugged. The board shifted. My mouth went dry. I pried it loose deeper, the sound of tearing wood echoing through the empty attic. A small gap opened just enough for me to slide my hand behind it. My fingertips brushed something thin, soft, familiar. Paper. My breath hitched. I pulled out a folded sheet, yellowed around the edges but intact. The torn edge on the left side confirmed it, the missing page from the notebook. For a moment, I just stared at it, unable to unfold it. My hands shook now, not from fear, but from the terrifying possibility that this piece of paper would finally answer the question that had haunted me since the night everything fell apart. Why did he destroy our friendship? And more importantly, was it really his choice? I sat down on an old wooden crate, the attic bulb flickering above me. The page felt heavy, heavier than it should. I unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was different. Not rushed. Not frantic. But deliberate. Careful. Like he wanted every word to be exact. It read. I'm scared of what I did. Not just the messages. Not just the lies. Something happened the night before the party. My heart kicked against my ribs. I saw something. I heard something. And I think it wants him. Cold swept through me. My hands trembled harder. It was in my room. Standing by the window. I couldn't move. It whispered something to me. My lungs tightened. It said he would leave me. It said he would replace me. It said I had to hurt him or lose everything. I felt my whole body go still. This wasn't jealousy. This wasn't teenage spite. This wasn't mental collapse. This was something else. Something directed. Something intelligent. I read the final line. I think it was right behind him that night. I think it followed him home. The page slipped from my fingers. My breath stuttered. A shadow shifted somewhere near the attic entrance behind me. The moment the floorboard creaked behind me, something inside my chest pulled tight, so violently, so instinctively, that every breath caught sharp in my throat. I turned my head slowly, too afraid to move more than an inch at a time. The attic behind me was dim, lit only by the flickering bulb overhead and the thin morning light squeezing through the small circular window. At first, I saw nothing. Just darkness. Stacks of boxes. Dust swirling in the still air. But then. Another creak. Closer. I froze. Is someone there? I whispered, hating how weak my voice sounded. Silence. Not the normal kind. Not the soft, gentle hush of an empty room. This was heavy. Like the silence thickened on purpose, pressing down on my skin, waiting for something, waiting for me. I stood slowly. My legs felt numb, my pulse thrashing in my neck. The missing notebook page lay on the floor at my feet, half crumpled. I wanted to pick it up. I didn't dare break eye contact with the darkness. The bulb flickered again. Once. Twice. On the third flicker, I saw it. Not clearly. Not enough to scream. But enough to know with bone-deep certainty. Something had shifted. Something was standing by the attic ladder. The shape was human in outline, but wrong. The shoulders too stiff. The posture too still. A silhouette where no silhouette should have been. I blinked hard and it vanished, like the darkness swallowed it whole. My breath trembled out in a shaky exhale. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. Except, the boards creaked again, and this time the sound traveled toward me, slow, deliberate. I took a step back, my heel hitting the crate behind me. The attic floor felt uneven under my feet, like the entire space was breathing in and out. Stop, I said, barely above a whisper. Please. The creaking stopped. My chest tightened painfully. I had no idea if it listened, or if my mind filled in the silence with my own terror. I forced a swallow and crouched quickly to grab the page. My fingers shook violently as I clenched it in my hand. Reading it again felt impossible, but the words burned in my mind like scars. I think it was right behind him that night. I think it followed him home. Followed me. Not him. Me. A new realization hit me with full force, cold and sharp. He hadn't been afraid of himself. He'd been afraid of whatever was around me. Whatever attached itself to me. Whatever whispered to him about me. I staggered back toward the ladder, my breath coming too fast, my thoughts spinning out of control. I had to get out. I had to talk to him. I had to understand what he meant by it followed him home. I placed one foot on the top rung of the ladder. And the bulb above me went out. Darkness slammed into the attic like a closing fist. My breath shattered. I clung to the ladder with both hands, suddenly terrified of stepping into the wrong spot, of falling through the floor, of something unseen brushing my shoulder. Then. A whisper. Soft. Close. Right behind my ear. Don't leave yet. I jerked away so violently I nearly slipped. My foot scraped the rung, and for a second, I hung in the empty air above the hallway. A sickening rush of vertigo swept over me. I scrambled to pull myself onto the ladder again. No, 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 I muttered, breathless. There was no one behind me. No breath. No warmth. No body. Just the echo of the words reverberating in my skull. I forced myself downward, rung by rung, refusing to look back into the attic. Each creak of the ladder sounded like bones twisting. When my feet hit the hallway floor at last, my knees nearly buckled. I slammed the ladder back up, the door clicking shut with a final, merciful thud. The hallway was brighter than the attic, but I didn't feel relief. If anything, my skin crawled worse. Like something had followed me halfway down. I backed away slowly until my spine hit the wall. I pressed my palm over my pounding heart, trying to breathe normally. This wasn't possible. This wasn't rational. This wasn't. But the page was still in my hand, its edges sharp against my fingers. I forced myself to unfold it one more time. And I noticed something I hadn't before. On the bottom corner, barely visible beneath the frantic lines of ink, were faint marks. Scratches. Not from a pen. Not from handwriting. From fingernails. My head spun. He wasn't alone when he wrote this. That thought hit me with such force I felt my stomach twist. I stumbled down the hallway toward his room, gripping the page like a lifeline. His sister was in the hall, startled when she saw me. What happened? She asked, eyes widening. You look. Where is he? I rasped. In his room, but he needs. I brushed past her before she could finish. My hands pushed the door open. The room smelled different now, like metal and antiseptic and something faintly sour. He was awake. And he was crying. When he looked at me, his eyes brimmed with a kind of terror I had never seen in anyone's face, not even during the worst nights of our lives. You felt it, he whispered. It wasn't a question. I nodded, unable to speak. He looked away, his whole body shaking. It's not mine, he said. It never was. My heartbeat stuttered. Then whose is it? He met my eyes again. His voice dropped to a trembling whisper. It's yours. The room blurred. My legs went weak. But he wasn't finished. I didn't hurt you because I hated you, he said. I hurt you because something inside you was hurting me. A cold, suffocating silence filled the space between us. He reached for my hand, grasping it weakly. You're not here to forgive me, he breathed. You're here to remember. A chill crawled down my spine. What do you mean? I whispered. His breath rattled. That night. He swallowed. The thing in your room wasn't in my head. My world tilted. There was something in your house, he whispered. Something in your shadow. Something that wanted to stay. He struggled for air, gripping my hand harder. And it never left. His words struck me so sharply, so coldly, that for a moment I genuinely thought the room had tilted sideways. I stared at him, my hand still clasped tightly in his, my breath stuck halfway between denial and something much worse, recognition. A terrifying, quiet recognition, the kind you don't want to admit even when the truth is whispering right into your ear. It never left, he repeated, his voice shaking. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. That he was delusional. That the sickness twisting his body was twisting his mind too. But I couldn't. Not after the attic. Not after the whisper. Not after the shadow that wasn't a shadow. I forced air into my lungs. What are you talking about? He closed his eyes like he was bracing himself. Do you remember that night? The night before the party? Of course I remembered. At least, I thought I did. I remembered studying late. I remembered the streetlights reflecting off my window. I remembered feeling tense. Uneasy. Restless. But his voice pulled at something deeper, something I didn't want to touch. You called me, he whispered. Around midnight. No, I said immediately. I never called you. His eyes opened, slowly, painfully. You did. I remember the way you whispered. How scared you sounded. I shook my head harder. I never. You told me something was in your room. My heart punched my ribs. No, I said again, but my voice cracked. I would remember that. Maybe not, he said softly. Maybe that's the point. I stepped back. The room felt too small, like the walls were inching in. He watched me with a kind of sadness that made it hard to breathe. You came to my house, he said. You don't remember that either, do you? I stared at him. No. You were shaking, he whispered. You said something touched your shoulder. You said you heard breathing that wasn't yours. The room tilted again. That's not possible, I murmured. He didn't look away. You stayed in my room for hours, he said. Until you calmed down. But even then, you kept looking over your shoulder. Like something was standing behind you. I staggered back until I hit the wall. No. No. This wasn't real. This wasn't my memory. I would have remembered something like that. Except the older I got, the more I realized that memory isn't a photograph. It's a negotiation. A reconstruction. A fragile collection of things we choose to keep and things we subconsciously burn. What happened after that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He swallowed. I fell asleep. And when I woke up, you were gone. Your shoes were still by the bed. But you weren't. A cold wave ran down my spine. I thought you went home, he continued. Until I found you. My breath hitched. Where? He looked at me like the answer might break me. In the hallway. Kneeling. Facing the window. I didn't speak. I couldn't. You were whispering, he said, his voice trembling. You kept saying the same thing, over and over. My throat tightened. What was I saying? His eyes glistened. Stop touching me. A shiver ripped down my spine so violently I had to grip the chair beside the bed to stay upright. That's not possible, I whispered again. I would remember that. He shook his head slowly. Not if it didn't want you to. My stomach twisted. What didn't want me to? He inhaled shakily. Whatever was with you. The room buzzed faintly, like the air between us vibrated with something unsaid, something ancient. I looked at him, really looked at him, thin, pale, dying, and yet more certain than he had been in years. What happened next? I asked, forcing the words out. His voice cracked. I took you home. You didn't speak. Not all the way to your house. Not even when I tried to shake you awake. My lungs hurt. When you stood at your bedroom door, he whispered, you looked at me like you didn't recognize me. Like you weren't fully there. I pressed a hand to my forehead, dizzy. And then, he said, you said something I'll never forget. My voice quivered. What did I say? He swallowed, eyes wet. You said, it followed us. I felt the blood drain from my face. And when I asked what you meant, he continued, his voice fragile as cracked glass, you said, it likes you too. My entire body turned cold. That's why I avoided you, he whispered. Not because I hated you. Not because I wanted to hurt you. But because I was terrified that whatever was happening to you would start happening to me too. I stared at him, my mind spiraling. You're lying, I whispered, but there was no conviction left in me. I wish I was, he said. I shook my head. This doesn't make sense. I had friends. I had a normal life. My family would have noticed. He cut me off. Do you remember waking up with scratches on your back that summer? I froze. Everyone gets scratches from sleeping. Do you remember why you stopped sleeping with the light off? My breath caught. That was a phase. Do you remember the nightmares? He whispered. I swallowed hard. I didn't have nightmares. He didn't blink. Yes, you did. I pressed my back against the wall, sliding down until I was sitting on the cold tiles. My pulse thundered so loudly I could barely hear his next words. There's something else, he said. Something important. I looked up, barely able to speak. What more is there? He took a long breath, his voice a thread. The thing in your room, the thing that whispered to me, the thing that followed us. His eyes locked onto mine, filled with terror and certainty. It wasn't after me. A pause. A heavy, breaking pause. It was after you. My breath slipped out in a trembling whisper. Why? He looked at me with a kind of sorrow I didn't know a person could hold. Because that night, you invited it. The world fell silent. He continued, barely audible. And you don't remember what you said. My chest tightened. What did I say? His voice cracked. You told it to stay. For a long time, I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. His words seemed to echo through the room, bouncing off the walls, twisting into shapes I didn't recognize. You told it to stay. It sounded impossible. Unimaginable. Insane. And yet, somewhere deep inside my chest, far beneath logic, beneath memory, beneath every rational explanation, something stirred. Something old. Something buried. Like a branch snapping under snow after a long winter. I shook my head, hard, as if I could force the thought out physically. I would never say something like that, I whispered. He didn't argue. He just looked at me with an expression so heartbreakingly sad it hollowed me out. You didn't know what you were saying, he murmured. You were half asleep. Or half awake. Or somewhere between both. I don't think you understood what was happening to you. I don't understand it now, I snapped, more sharply than I meant. How could I? I don't remember any of this. He flinched, but not from anger. From pain. I know. And I'm sorry. If I had told you back then, maybe things would have been different. No, I said. If you had told me back then, I would have thought you were insane. He gave a weak, humorless laugh. Maybe I was. Silence fell between us again, heavy, cold, suffocating. I sank into the chair by his bed, burying my face in my hands. My mind spun in dizzying circles. Memories started to flicker through me, not fully formed, not concrete, but sensations. Impressions. A cold breeze where there shouldn't have been one. The feeling of someone watching me. Waking up in the middle of the night with my skin crawling. The closet door slightly open when I swore I had closed it. Dreams I couldn't quite recall, leaving behind only fear like a wet shadow on my chest. No. These were just childhood fears. Everyone has them. Except the feeling didn't come from childhood. It came from an age when I should have known better. I lifted my head slowly. Why didn't I remember any of this? He exhaled shakily. Because whatever it was, didn't want you to. I stared at him. You keep calling it. What does that even mean? What are we talking about? A shadow? A hallucination? Some kind of shared psychosis? He shook his head. It wasn't a hallucination. I wasn't sick then. Not like now. And you weren't either. Then what? He swallowed. Do you remember that summer? The heat wave? The nights we couldn't sleep because it was too hot. Yes, I said cautiously. Do you remember the power outages? Yes. And do you remember what happened the night the power went out for 4 hours? I searched my mind, but there was nothing. A blank space. A fog. A gap. He took my silence as confirmation. That was the night it started, he whispered. A tremor ran through me. You came to my house, he continued, voice thin. You didn't knock. You didn't call. You just walked in and sat on the floor of my room. I woke up and found you staring at the wall. My pulse stumbled. You said, he breathed, it's in the dark. My skin tightened, prickling with cold. And then, he said, you smiled. My blood ran cold. No. That can't be right. I would never. You smiled, he repeated, tears forming in his eyes. But it wasn't like you. And you didn't blink for almost a minute. I covered my mouth, nausea rising. I thought you were sleepwalking, he whispered. I tried to shake you awake. And you grabbed my wrist so hard it bruised. A flash, just for a second, stabbed through my mind. A wrist. My hand tightening. His voice calling my name. My breath slowing to something unnatural. Then it was gone. I dug my nails into my palm until it hurt. This is insane. I know, he said softly. I know how it sounds. Why didn't you tell anyone? His voice cracked. Because I promised you. I looked up sharply. Promised me what? He closed his eyes, pained. You don't remember. Tell me. You said, he whispered, don't tell them. It will get angry. My entire body went numb. No. No, no, no. That couldn't be me. Those couldn't be my words. I didn't say that, I whispered. You did, he said, meeting my gaze. You said it calmly. Like someone else was choosing the words for you. The room felt like it was shrinking. And after that night, he continued, you changed. Not all at once. But slowly. You stopped sleeping. You stopped laughing. You started watching shadows like they were saying your name. My breath came out shaky. I don't remember any of that. You're not supposed to, he whispered. I pressed my trembling fingers to my temples. Why would I invite something like that? Why would I ask it to stay? He coughed again, deep, rattling, painful. His sister rushed in, but he lifted a hand weakly. Wait, he told her. Just, one more minute. She hesitated, then stepped back. He looked at me, truly looked at me, as if searching for the boy he once knew. You didn't invite it, he said slowly. Not the way you think. My heart thudded painfully. You were lonely, he whispered. Your parents were fighting. Your brother was never home. You thought something in the dark was watching you. I felt something collapse inside me. And you weren't scared, he said. Not at first. You were relieved. Tears blurred my vision. You said, he breathed, if you're here, then I'm not alone. A sob rose in my throat. And that, he whispered, was the moment it stayed. Silence. Heavy. Breaking. Final. I wiped my face with shaking hands. So what now? I asked. What am I supposed to do with this? He inhaled shakily. You have to remember the rest. The rest of what? I whispered. The rest of that night, he said. I blinked. But I don't remember anything else. He squeezed my hand with the last of his strength. You will, he whispered. Tonight. The fear that hit me then wasn't loud. It wasn't overwhelming. It wasn't even sharp. It was quiet. Dark. Familiar. Like something inside me had been waiting for this moment. Waiting to wake up. That night, I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay in the narrow guest bed his sister had prepared for me, staring at the ceiling, staring at the faint pattern of shadows cast by the street lamp outside, watching them shift and stretch like something alive. His words kept circling in my mind, refusing to quiet. You didn't invite it the way you think. You were lonely. You weren't scared at first. You told it to stay. Tonight, you'll remember. I wanted to deny all of it, push it away, bury it under rational explanations. Trauma. Stress. False memory. Shared delusion. Grief. Anything would have been easier than accepting what the pieces suggested when put together. I wasn't just remembering the past. I was preparing to relive it. Around 2 a.m., I gave up pretending I could rest and sat up. The air felt heavy. Too still. Like the room was holding its breath. Outside, the wind brushed softly against the windowpane. A normal sound on any other night. On this night, it felt like a whisper. You're tired, I murmured to myself. You're scared. You're vulnerable. You're imagining. A floorboard in the hallway creaked. I froze. For a long moment, I didn't move. Then I slid out of bed and walked to the door. The hallway was dark except for the weak glow of the nightlight near the bathroom. The house was quiet. His sister's room door was closed. The living room was empty. But the air felt wrong. Like something familiar was brushing against the edges of my senses. Something I hadn't felt in years but recognized instantly. A presence. No sound. No breath. Just a feeling. A coldness that sank into my bones. I reached for the wall to steady myself. My pulse thundered so violently I felt it in my fingertips. My throat tightened, and suddenly, I wasn't in the hallway anymore. I was 17 again. Sitting on the floor of my friend's room. Staring at a wall I couldn't explain. Feeling a cold touch on my shoulder that wasn't human. Smiling without knowing why. Whispering words I didn't choose. The memory slammed into me so hard my knees buckled. I grabbed the doorknob of the guest room and held it like a lifeline. No, I whispered. Not again. Not now. Then another memory resurfaced. Me, on my knees in the hallway. Facing the window. Whispering, stop touching me. Too scared to scream. Too frozen to run. My breath came in ragged gasps. The fear felt exactly the same. Like time wasn't moving forward, just folding back in on itself. I forced myself to step into the hallway, even though every cell in my body screamed at me to run the other way. The air felt colder the closer I got to his bedroom door. He said I would remember tonight. Maybe this was happening because he was leaving. Maybe some part of me was collapsing with the weight of the past. Maybe memory was just a cruel trick. Or maybe it never left. I reached his door and knocked softly. No answer. My chest tightened. I turned the doorknob and stepped inside. The room was dark, illuminated only by moonlight spilling through the half-open curtains. The bed was still. Too still. I walked closer. His sister was beside him, holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. My breath caught. He was gone. My legs went weak, and for a moment, everything blurred. I reached for the back of the chair and gripped it so tightly my knuckles turned white. His sister didn't look at me, didn't speak. She just sank forward, her head on the edge of the bed, shoulders shaking. The quiet was absolute. I swallowed hard, stepping closer. His face looked peaceful, more peaceful than any moment he'd had in the last decade. All the pain, the guilt, the terror that had hollowed him out was gone. But the silence he left behind felt colder than anything I had ever experienced. I'm sorry, I whispered, though I didn't know whether I was saying it to him or his sister or the younger version of myself. She rose slowly, eyes swollen and red. He waited for you, she said. He held on until he knew you heard him. I felt something inside me break. I didn't want him to die with this alone, she continued, wiping her face. He carried it for too long. I nodded weakly, unable to speak. She stepped out of the room, leaving me alone with him. I sat down in the chair beside the bed, trembling. The house was so quiet. Too quiet. Like every sound was waiting for something. Then. A whisper. Not outside. Not behind me. Inside my head. Soft. Low. Familiar. You remember. I stiffened. The air grew colder. A flood of memories tore through me, uninvited, unstoppable. Me standing at my bedroom window. Feeling something behind me. Smiling when I should have run. Whispering into the dark, if you're here. I'm not alone. Inviting it. Asking it to stay. Letting it follow me. Not because I was brave. Not because I was foolish. But because I was lonely. And it felt comforting. The truth hit like a punch. It didn't follow me. I called it. I buried my face in my hands, shaking so hard the chair creaked beneath me. I'm not that person anymore, I whispered desperately. I'm not that scared kid. The coldness in the room thickened. Pressed against my skin. But this time. For the first time. I didn't run. I raised my head, tears blurring the moonlight. I'm not alone anymore, I said, voice breaking. Not like I was then. And I don't need you. The coldness trembled. Wavered. Then slowly. Painfully. Lifted. The air warmed. The room returned. The silence softened. It didn't answer. It didn't whisper. It didn't cling. It just left. And the weight I had carried without knowing finally broke loose. I put my hand over my friend's, the tears coming freely now, unstoppable. I'm sorry, I whispered. For leaving you alone with this. For letting it take so much from you. The room stayed quiet. But it was a human quiet now. Not the other kind. I stayed beside him until the first light of dawn crept into the room. His sister returned with tea neither of us drank. When I finally stood, the missing page was still in my pocket. Heavy. Real. A reminder, not a curse. I walked out of the house with a strange, painful calm settling inside me. Not peace. But something like it. Because for the first time in years, I could breathe without feeling watched. And though I didn't know what came next, I knew this. Some ghosts don't haunt you because they want to. They haunt you because you never told them they could leave. Now I had. And somewhere, I hoped he heard it too,